Welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 76. This is the Week 15 recap episode where the Cincinnati Bengals got another win in not really very convincing fashion down in Tennessee, 37-27. Bengals put up over 33 points and actually won a game for once this season. So all that offense finally paid off. But it was also some defense too, and some help from the other team as well. Bengals, at least what I can say about this game was, unlike last week, it didn't feel like the other team totally gave the game away to the Bengals. At least the Bengals were the better team on the field, to the eye, and on paper, just because the Tennessee Titans played so poorly, specifically their starting quarterback. But that's just, what you're going to get sometimes in the NFL late in the year when teams are eliminated. I'm not going to say the Tennessee Titans gave up. They definitely were trying to win, probably, in this game. But the Bengals have a little bit more to play for. Their season's not entirely over yet, so there's still a chance for them to make some kind of miraculous comeback late in this season. So there's still life, no matter how slim it might be. But it's too early, of course, to worry about anything beyond what happened in this game. And there's lots to break down in this game. I was trying to think of an analogy, because this game was remarkable in the fact that as far back as the broadcast could go in their statistics, which is 2000, this was the first game that had 10 turnovers and 25 plus penalties. There's actually 26 combined accepted penalty flags in this game. So as much football action as was going on the field, I felt like I spent half the game watching the referee, just stand around, discuss what penalty flag they're going to throw. There was some penalties I've never even seen called in a game in this game. So there was so much strange behavior. Joe Burrow had multiple turnovers in this game. 3 turnovers, very unusual for Joe Burrow. So despite the fact that Joe Burrow had 3 touchdown passes, one of them to a defensive player, which was crazy. The Bengals haven't had a defensive player score an offensive touchdown since 1968. Sam Hubbard got his first touchdown catch in the NFL, and unfortunately that may also be Sam Hubbard's last play as a Cincinnati Bengal. More on that later. Injury update on Sam Hubbard came out after this. Not good for Sam Hubbard, but Bengals got the win. Chase Brown, the running back, continued to have a strong performance. Not quite 100 yards. I think he had 97 yards on 25 carries, including a nice stretch of carries at the end of the game when the Bengals needed to grind out some clock, and get a game-winning drive. They were able to do that on the back of Chase Brown. He's been the workhorse back, exceeding my expectations and everyone else. Although he led the NCAA in carries his last year at Illinois, so maybe not a surprise that he's able to handle a substantial number of carries every game. That's kind of what he did when he was in college. But college and the NFL, it's hard to translate that, but he's been able to do it better than I even expected. This was also a bounce-back game for T. Higgins, who is making his return to his home state of Tennessee. T. Higgins was able to have 88 yards off of 5 catches on 8 targets, including one 38-yard touchdown, where T got hit from Daryl Worley, the safety. Took a big hit, but was able to hang on, secure the catch, and then all the fans in the stadium, or a lot of the fans, were chanting T, because he is from Tennessee. But also Cincinnati Bengals fans made the relatively short trip down to Nashville, so probably a good weekend for people to head down south to Nissan Stadium and check this game out against a team in the Tennessee Titans who were 3-10 coming into this one, already eliminated. And we saw old offensive coordinator Brian Callahan and his dad on the opposite sideline during this game. Tyler Boyd actually made some nice plays in this game for the Tennessee Titans. And like that old Jerry Seinfeld joke, people boo the player when they switch to the other team. It's like, boo, other shirt, boo, other shirt. I mean, I saw Tyler Boyd out there, number 83 for the Titans, making a nice 40-yard catch. So I was cheering for him on that one, but I was also cheering because he didn't score a touchdown. He's still not fast enough to really do anything once he gets the ball into his hands and out in the open field. So Cam Taylor-Britt was able to make a nice tackle on Tyler Boyd to prevent him from getting in the end zone on that particular play. Speaking of old Bengals, we saw Chidobe Awuzie, number 13 now for the Tennessee Titans. He was making plays, breaking up some passes. Also got called for a defensive pass interference penalty at one point in this game, but the referees were calling this game so tight. There was a lot of defensive pass interference for both teams. Cam Taylor-Britt got a defensive pass interference that basically set up the Titans to go in for a walk-in touchdown at the 1 yard line, where it was you could have said it was incidental contact. It looked like Cam Taylor-Britt kind of stuck his leg out to trip the receiver on the way down, but the ball was already hitting the ground by the time he tripped him up. So questionable call there. The Titans also got called. Kenneth Murray Jr. got called for a pass interference over the back of Chase Brown, where it looked like he barely had his hand on the back of Chase Brown, the running back for the Bengals. Penalty flags were out immediately. There were some crazy penalties, though, all through this game. They were calling offensive tackles for false starting on both teams. Bengals and Titans left tackles were false starting. First play of the game, the Bengals had a false start on number 85, rookie tight end Cam Grandy. Cam Grandy had 2 false start penalties, and then he almost had a third, but I think it was one of the other tackles next to him jumped first, so they called the guy next to him, but he jumped multiple times in this game. There was a penalty on T. Higgins that I've never seen called in a game in my life, where they said T. Higgins was not lined up in the backfield. T. Higgins lined up directly in the gap between the tight end and the tackle on the left side. He lined up between Drew Sample and I think it was Devin Cochran, number 76, who was the rookie tackle starting in his first game, getting his first real snaps in the NFL because Cody Ford all of a sudden had the flu right before the game, so he wasn't able to play in this game. So the Bengals were playing with their third left tackle because Orlando Brown was also out in this game. Don't forget, he's probably going to shut it down. For some reason, they're not putting him on injured reserve. Bengals aren't putting a lot of people on injured reserve for some reason. I think it's just to save money, to be honest with you, because DJ Turner broke his collarbone and they still haven't put him on injured reserve yet. They're just taking up a roster spot, not filling it with anybody, but this guy's got a broken collarbone. We know he's not coming back this season, Bengals. Why don't you sign somebody? But they won't for some reason. But anyway, T. Higgins lined up in the gap between tight end and tackle, and it was a running play. And I guess the only thing that they could have said was that T's helmet was lined up with the center's hips, basically, because that's what is supposed to designate who's on the line of scrimmage and who's not. So they're saying T, even though he was lined up behind those two guys, he wasn't next to them on the line of scrimmage, he was behind them. But they're saying T apparently is so tall at 6'5" or whatever he is, that he was next. It didn't make any sense. There was no way that T was lined up on the line of scrimmage. If he would have been I don't know, humping these guys basically to not be behind them. It didn't make any sense. But there was a lot of calls that didn't make any sense in this game. We didn't see any egregious missed face mask penalties, but we saw some strange plays. There was a rough start by the Bengals. They got off. Joe Burrow threw his first half interception of the year. It was on the first drive of the Bengals had in the first game, or first drive of the game for the Bengals. Joe Burrow threw an interception to the linebacker, Luke Gifford, where it didn't look like the linebacker caught it initially. It looked like it hit the ground, but then on slow motion replay, he just barely got his hands underneath the ball before it hit the ground. So great play by the Tennessee Titans. They were able to push that in for a score. Titans actually went up 7-0 to take the lead in this game. And for most of the first half, the Titans were actually winning. It wasn't until right before halftime that the Bengals were able to score their third touchdown and take the lead for good in this game. But it was, especially in the first half of the game, it was looking very touch and go for the Bengals. Luckily, Tennessee Titans imploded thanks to Will Levis committing 4 turnovers by himself. Will Levis threw 3 interceptions, also gave away a fumble. So, wow, that is an incredible... I'm just looking at the box score for this game. I didn't see the QBR rating. So the QBR on ESPN is out of 100, mind you. Will Levis got a 1.1 out of 100. I've never seen a score that low. I don't think I've ever seen a score in the ones. 1.1. Wow. So Will Levis, he also had a sack for 7 yards. But the thing that's crazy about Will Levis was he was 8 for 12 passing for 89 yards, but also had 3 interceptions. So he only threw 1 incomplete pass. 8 of them went to his own teammates. 3 of them went to the Bengals. 1 was incomplete. 1.1. Truly a terrible performance by the Tennessee Titans quarterback. So when you come up against a team like that, where basically the other team's quarterback is giving you the ball multiple times, it's hard not to win. So as good as it was to get this win, you can't come away from this game as a Bengals fan, coach, or player thinking like, oh yeah, now we're gonna make a run, and everybody's talking about, oh, the Bengals are right back in it now because they need, basically everybody's talking about how can the Bengals get in the playoffs. That's the thing that's so insidious about the NFL, the way that they've changed everything up now. In years past, this Bengals season would have been long dead and buried a long time ago. There would have been no hope. People would not have been talking about any hope. But now that it's not just 6 teams that get into the playoff, they added that 7th wild card team, and they added 17 games to the regular season instead of 16. So now you have even more chance to come back at the very end, and there's more opportunities to get in. So now all of those people who just 2 weeks ago were saying they should fire Zach Taylor, fire Duke Tobin, get rid of everybody on defense, bring in a whole new team, those same people are now in the comments like, oh, we're still in it, guys. We're going to make a run. We're not out of this yet. So people are so wishy-washy and inconsistent with their fanaticism. But I have been consistent this whole time in saying the Bengals aren't that good. I still think they're not that good, but they're just getting fortunate in the fact that they're playing a lot of teams that are also not that good and maybe a little bit worse than them. They're playing, the next is going to be Cleveland Browns, who have lost Nick Chubb for the rest of the season with a broken foot, unfortunately. So they're going to have Jameis Winston and Jerry Jeudy and probably not a lot else offensively, but Browns are still going to have tough defense. But that's for the next episode. Bengals are going to be favored by 7 going into that game too. So now people are starting to get a sniff of maybe there's a chance, although unlikely. The Colts and the Dolphins also lost. So now they're 6-8 right alongside the Bengals. Bengals are still at the bottom of that list because they have lost so many AFC conference games. They don't have a tiebreaker against anybody. So they still need to get a lot of help to have any shot. But no, I know nobody cares about fantasy football. I'm not going to spend any time on my fantasy team. But there was a time earlier in the season it looked like all was lost for my fantasy team. I managed just in the last week to just somehow squeak into the playoffs. And then first week of the playoffs, I got a miraculous come from behind fantasy victory. So my fortunes turned all the way around. Same thing could happen for the Bengals in real life, but it's not that likely. But at least the games will be more enjoyable and interesting and have some kind of stakes attached to them when we watch them, and not just 2 completely dead teams going up against each other with nothing at stake at all. That's the least interesting kind of football game to watch. So this Bengals-Browns game coming up will have a little bit more spice. But speaking of spice, I can't believe I buried the lead. I always do that. I buried the lead. The biggest takeaway from this game, without a doubt, hands down, was the fact that Joe Burrow was, warning, this is the episode where I'm going to have to curse a little bit. So earmuffs in advance. Don't get your, pearls, clutching your pearls because I didn't warn you. I'm warning you, cursing ahead. So anyway, Joe Burrow finally decided that he was sick and tired of all of Zach Taylor's bullshit, and he had had enough. Somebody broke into his house last week. They invaded his privacy. He's always having to do all these interviews, give people answers to questions that he doesn't really want to give the answers to. And he's had enough. He's had enough of everybody, including Zach Taylor. So at the end of this game, after the Bengals had committed 4 turnovers, the Titans had committed 6 turnovers. They're on the bench. Zach Taylor's on one knee, giving Joe Burrow some kind of pep talk about, oh yeah, nice job, buddy. He's giving him the little league coach speech. Good job out there, Slugger. You did a great job. We'll keep this momentum going into the next game, and we'll be back in this thing. Don't you worry, buddy. You couldn't see what Zach Taylor's face, or you couldn't see Zach Taylor's face on the broadcast. You could only see him from behind, but you could just see he was kind of nodding up and down, positivity. Oh yeah, buddy. And then the look on Joe Burrow's face was completely the opposite. Total contrast, shaking his head. No. He's just like, that was embarrassing. We suck today. And Zach Taylor's coming back like, no, yeah, we're good. And Joe Burrow just looks at him dead in the eyes. He's like, fuck that. He's like, we sucked. This was embarrassing. He points at the scoreboard. He's probably talking about all the penalties, all the turnovers. I couldn't tell what he said at the last part. It was something like, how are we going to be in anything or something like that. But basically, when you're at the end of the game and your head coach is trying to tell you, oh, everything's great, and you just look at him straight in the eyes and you're like, fuck that. That's basically like saying, fuck that and fuck you. I don't give a fuck what you're talking about anymore. Stick your bullshit straight up your ass is basically what he's telling him. So needless to say, Joe Burrow did not receive a game ball after this game. In fact, the one thing I noticed with the game ball presentations, they normally show the player catching the ball when Zach Taylor throws it to him. But everybody noticed when Joe Burrow got the game ball last time, he threw it back. So they maybe don't want to have any slip-ups with that. The Bengals are very closely monitoring their image. They got their communications director, Emily Parker, especially because they got the Hard Knocks cameras everywhere. Everybody's watching every step the Bengals are taking. So they want to make sure that everything is very carefully curated and manufactured to look good and present well. So it's weird how when you see Zach Taylor on the sidelines, he's got the Bengals communications director, who's like this middle-aged woman standing right behind him at all turns. It doesn't matter where Zach Taylor goes, she's right there, like in his hip pocket, following him all around. She's like the get-back coach, except she's out there like literally like 2 feet behind him everywhere you go. And so she's always around trying to make sure nobody says anything bad. Everybody who's mic'd up have a positive, image that they're presenting. So I'm sure this was not going to be something they wanted to play up a lot, especially after the game. When they asked Joe Burrow about it, he just said he was frustrated about the turnovers and the penalties, and he was just kind of voicing that frustration, but it wasn't a big deal. They asked Zach Taylor about it, said looked like Joe Burrow was getting irate with you on the sidelines. He said, oh no, it was just a normal back and forth conversation, nothing more to see, basically nothing to see here. Let's sweep this under the rug. And I'm sure the Bengals are going to try to erase that from the public consciousness. Nobody talk about the time that Joe Burrow looked at the head coach and said, fuck you. So, but I that's what I took from that game. So that's what I'm going to remember, is just the look of disgust and just contempt that Joe Burrow had in his face when he was looking at Zach Taylor. And Zach Taylor didn't hang around for very long. You could see as soon as he was getting that kind of comeback from Joe Burrow, he got up and walked away as soon as possible, because he knew that he was going to be on camera, and that was not going to be a good look for him to be getting cursed out by his quarterback on national TV. So thank you, Fox, for capturing that moment. I don't know how they were able to see that that was going to happen right then. Maybe that had been ongoing for a number of minutes or something, because that was the end of the game. After the Bengals had already won is when Joe Burrow was saying fuck that to Joe Burrow, or to Zach Taylor. So it was because just as the first series of the game started off as bad as it can go, the Bengals, they scored a touchdown on the last drive, but it was about as ugly as you can get, because they got it first and goal at the 1 yard line of Tennessee. Then the first down, they got a false start penalty, I think it was. Or no, delay of game. Something was going on with the headset in Zach Taylor's ear, so he couldn't call in the plays on time. They didn't look at the clock. They had people shifting, going in motion. Everything was late. The timing was screwed up. So first and goal from the 1, they're moving back 5 yards from a delay of game. Then after the penalty, they got it from first and goal from the 6. Then they get another false start. I think that might have been on one of the linemen or Cam Graney. So now they got at the 11-yard line, first and goal. They were able to finally get it into the end zone. Chase Brown had a couple runs to finally cap it off. But then even after they scored that final touchdown, then their kicker, Cade York, missed the extra point. So like everything, even though they scored and like basically capped off the game, everything that could have gone wrong basically did at the end of that. So Joe Burrow was just totally disgusted. He had no time to deal with Zach Taylor and all of his happy horse shit. And I'm right along with Joe Burrow with that. I am sick of Zach Taylor and all of his happy horse shit and telling me how there's still great things ahead of us. We're going to get all the momentum and good things are still going to happen this year. And they always talk about everybody's taking accountability for stuff. Well, one of the most ridiculous plays that you're ever going to see came in this game. Jordan Battle, what is he in his second year, third year in the NFL? Maybe his second year. Number 27. He's finally taken over the starting role at strong safety for Von Bell, who has, reached kind of the downside of his career in the NFL. And Jordan Battle was able to scoop up a fumble from Tony Pollard that was caused by rookie McKinley Jackson. So McKinley Jackson made a nice play, got into the backfield, caused some disruption, forced the fumble. Jordan Battle comes in, scoops it up. He takes off running towards the end zone. He's running 60 yards all the way, and at about the 5-yard line, for some reason, he had a short circuit in his brain, lost his mind, decided to shift the ball from his right hand to his left hand. Oh, whoops! Ball comes out. He fumbles it through the back of the end zone. And if you don't know the rules of the game, this is one of the weirder eccentricities of the game. If a fumbling player fumbles the ball through the end zone before they score and it goes out of bounds, the ball goes to the other team, 1st and 10, going the opposite direction at the 20-yard line. So instead of scoring a touchdown, worst possible thing happens. Everything's looking good. This is like the flip side of the game against the Cowboys, where the Cowboys, they block the punt, everything's looking good. Then all of a sudden the guy makes a terrible bonehead decision, tries to pick up the ball that's rolling at him, goes back to the Bengals, and they take it and score. Same situation in this. Bengals have a sure defensive score after Geno Stone already had his first career pick 6 in this game. Bengals are scoring, it looks like, multiple defensive touchdowns. Oh, wait, Jordan Battle loses his mind and fumbles through the end zone. And you can see all of his teammates are putting their hands on their heads like, oh no, what are you doing? And the thing that was truly remarkable about this whole situation, after the game, when they were interviewing the players, the reporters went up to Jordan Battle, and of course, they asked him, hey, what was up with that time when you looked like you were about to score a touchdown and then you fumbled it out of the back of the end zone? And his reply to the question made as little sense as the play itself. He told the reporters, well, I know what y'all are thinking, and y'all think that I did that intentionally, and no, I did not intentionally fumble the ball out of the back of the end zone. I know that's what y'all want, or that's what y'all think, but no, actually, I didn't do that on purpose. It was, Then he said, okay, so let's just break it down here. Why would anybody think that he would intentionally fumble it through the end zone? Nobody was thinking that. It didn't make any sense why he would suggest that. Nobody asked him, did you intentionally fumble it? Nobody, that doesn't make any sense. I don't know what he was talking about. Anyway, he continued by saying, well, if you know anything about, being a ball carrier, you got to carry it in your outside hand. So I was just trying to switch it to my outside, and that's when I fumbled, which also does not make any sense because he'd already run all the way down the field, 60 yards. And then he's trying to say at the last moment is when he needs to switch it to the outside hand. It's already too late by then. Just run it into the end zone with whatever hand the ball is in at that moment. So that whole logic of I need to switch it to my other hand right before I get in the end zone, that didn't make any sense either. Obviously, he was going to try to, put it up and spike it or do whatever kind of celebration. He didn't want to admit to it. And then, so Dan Horde, the announcer for the Bengals, he, at least to his credit, gave Jordan Battle a second chance. After he said, no, I didn't intentionally fumble it, which is completely obvious. He was like, so just to clarify, what you mean is you weren't trying to celebrate before you scored the touchdown. He's like, right. Yeah, I wasn't trying to celebrate. Yeah, that's what I meant. It didn't make any sense what he said. And it didn't make any sense what he did on the field. I don't know. Maybe that's the reason why he doesn't play more often, is because he does stuff like that in practice. I don't know. But one of the questions I had is, speaking of players who are making bad plays, Cam Grandy with all these false starts, he's an undrafted rookie tight end. Bengals drafted 2 tight ends. Everybody seems to forget that 6th-round draft pick Tanner McLachlan is still on the Bengals roster, active roster. He's a healthy scratch every week, doesn't suit up, doesn't put on pads. What is he doing this entire season? He hasn't played a single snap. They drafted this guy in the 6th round. Seems like a complete waste of a draft pick. I'm not seeing him in practice, but I'm also not seeing him in the game. So what's up with that? Seems weird. Why don't they just cut him if he can't play? But Of course, the Bengals are ones to just hang on to draft picks for no good reason, i.e. Charlie Jones, another guy. He scored like twice in his career off of 2 punt returns that were basically set up entirely for him by the blocking. Other than that, he hasn't done much, and except be injured every week, but they still keep him on the team for some ungodly reason. Anyway, yeah, some weird plays all the way through this game, beginning, middle, and end. Who else? Josh Newton, rookie cornerback number 28. He got his first career interception. Mike Hilton got an interception off of a Josh Newton deflection, which is good to see. I think Dan Horde gave credit to Cam Taylor-Britt on the deflection, but it was actually Josh Newton. It's number 28 is Newton, number 29 is Cam Taylor-Britt. But it's weird how whenever you hear people on podcasts or shows when they're talking about the Bengals and defensive backs, a lot of time they give credit and blame to Cam Taylor-Britt, even if he wasn't the player involved, just because he's got for some reason the most notoriety or name recognition. So even things like for example, I've heard when people talk about the game against the Chiefs way back early in the season, and there was the defensive pass interference call on 4th down that basically set up the Chiefs to win the game. Nobody remembers the player that they always say, oh, yeah, wasn't that Cam Taylor-Britt that got pass interference? Actually, no, it wasn't. It was Dejon Anthony, number 33. But nobody remembers who the fuck Dejon Anthony is. So they're like, I think it was Cam Taylor-Britt. Yeah. And it's so unfortunate for Dejon, because right after that, he said, that's not going to be the play that defines me. And it kind of was, I guess, if nobody remembers who you even were, that doesn't define you. I guess there's no definition if just nobody remembers who the fuck was that. But yeah, Dejon Anthony, haven't seen a lot of him lately. We didn't see a lot of Marco Wilson, surprisingly, in this game. I thought he played pretty well against the Cowboys, but they had a lot of Cam Taylor-Britt, Josh Newton, Jordan Battle. Geno Stone actually made some plays for 2 back-to-back weeks. This is Geno Stone's had interceptions. He had interception against the Cowboys, interception against the against the Titans. So Geno Stone finally making some plays. And this was a game, just looking at the stats again here, where the Bengals actually outgained their opponents running the ball. Bengals had 101 combined rushing yards between Chase Brown and Khalil Herbert. Tennessee Titans only had 83 yards between Tony Pollard, Calvin Ridley, and Tyjae Spears. Titans eventually had to bring in Mason Rudolph, who had an interception of his own early in the game, but he at least was able to move the ball a little bit better than Will Levis. Mason Rudolph was 21 for 26, 209 yards, 2 touchdowns, no sacks, QBR of 50. So when you compare 50 to Will Levis 1.1, you got to think if the Titans had just started Mason Rudolph to begin the game and not have Will Levis and his 4 turnovers, things might have gone differently. But when you think about a team like the Titans committing 6 turnovers in a game, it's hard to win when you give the ball to the Bengals 6 times. And to their credit, the Bengals tried to give it back to the Titans 4 times. So it was just like, I was trying to think of an analogy of some other sport. What would this game have been like? Between the 10 turnovers and the 26 penalties, it would be almost like if you were watching a baseball game and they set the record for most fielding errors and most people hit by a pitch in a game. It was like, oh, God, this game is not good. So, yeah, when they asked Zach Taylor about it on Monday, like, what'd you see on the film, coach? How did everything look? And he's like, yeah, there were some good things, but also some things we need to correct. Definitely all the penalties and the turnovers and fumbling the ball through the end zone when we're about to score a touchdown. That's not acceptable. So we need to get that cleaned up. And he said that they talk to defenders every week about the same play that basically Jordan Battle messed up. They say, don't fumble through the end zone. If you're carrying the ball, just keep it tucked away till you get all the way into the end zone. Don't drop it, because we see so many players throughout the years drop the ball like a yard or 2 before they get to the end zone, just because they are so excited that they're going to score a touchdown, their first touchdown maybe they've ever had, and then they drop the ball. And they say that they harp on that every week. They go over it all the time. We tell them up and down, blah, blah, blah. They know that. But then here in the game, Jordan Battle did exactly what they say don't do. So you could say we talk about it, we drill it with these guys, then why doesn't it show up on the field? Either the player's not listening, so it's kind of like a cover their own ass where the coaches are getting up there and say, well, we told these players what they got to do. They just don't listen to us. Well, why aren't they listening to you then, coach? Maybe we need to get some better coaches or some different coaches where the message would get across to these players. Because I think maybe some of these players are just tuning these coaches out and doing whatever it is they want to do, regardless of what the coach says. I don't know. But it just seems weird where they're playing in the, week 15 of the season and still talking about we need to get that stuff corrected and cleaned up. Well, there's only 3 weeks of the season left. Like, you think you're going to be making a lot of corrections at this point? They should already know. It should already be, in their minds of what they should do or not. But like I said, Jordan Battle, he didn't make any sense with the whole explanation of, no, of course you didn't intentionally fumble it. Stupid. What are you talking about? But yeah. What else do we see? So Sheldon Rankins continued to not play in this game. So we saw Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, like I mentioned. Now, one player we're not going to see much more of, most likely, is number 94, Sam Hubbard. He has been dealing with a hamstring injury all season, but was able to play through it and not have to undergo surgery. But Sam Hubbard has been lining up as a tight end in the Bengals goal line formations all season. And it was just a matter of time where they're going to try to throw a pass to him. They've ran him out there maybe 5 or 6 times and not thrown the pass. So they decided this week is going to be the week, probably because, the Titans aren't good. Neither one of these teams probably has anything to play for. So now is the time where they're going to break out the Sam Hubbard pass from Joe Burrow. And to their credit, it worked. Sam Hubbard went up. He said he was practicing all Friday, catching passes, making sure that he wasn't going to drop it. And it was not a wide open pass either. The Titans did a good job of staying with Sam Hubbard, but it was a good pass, accurate pass where only Sam Hubbard could catch it from Joe Burrow, and he did a good job. He had a little bit of a bobble, like Moose Johnson said on the broadcast, a little bit of a bobble, but no big deal. He was able to catch it, secure the catch all the way, and score the touchdown, and then he did a spike and a flex. He said he had the celebration already planned out, what he was going to do. He did the Gronk spike and then the signature Sam Hubbard flex, went right over to the sidelines, and was immediately ruled out for the rest of the game with a knee injury. So, Zach Taylor on Monday said that Sam's immediate reaction was, screw it, I'm going to play. He probably said, fuck it, I'm going to play anyway. But the trainers and doctors said, actually, no, you're not, because it seemed like Sam Hubbard had torn his PCL in his knee. When he came down, he hit his knee pretty hard on the ground. And I can't remember who it was, but there was another similar play in the game where a player banged their knee on the ground, and they were talking about it later where I think it was on the NFL Insider show I was watching. I remember it was the Christian McCaffrey injury. Christian McCaffrey, the running back for the 49ers, he was playing in that game in Buffalo in the snow. He hit his knee on the ground and injured his PCL. So it sounds like a similar situation for Sam Hubbard, and his knee. Hit that knee, did the PCL. He's likely going to be done for the rest of the season. But it's another situation where Zach Taylor came out and said, too early to tell. We're going to get some MRIs, get more information. We'll just work through it as we go on that one. So most likely Sam Hubbard is going to be on injured reserve, but they haven't put him on injured reserve yet. I don't know. It could be another money-saving, cost strategy of, if we don't put him on injured reserve, we don't have to fill the spot on the roster. If we don't fill the spot on the roster, we don't have to pay anybody any extra money. So as much money as the Bengals have already spent on Sam Hubbard and Sheldon Rankins and all the rest of these players that they're not getting a lot of production out of, they don't want to necessarily have to spend any more if they don't have to. I mean, the season's already pretty much over anyway. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll see if they call anybody else up. The Bengals, for some reason, called up Logan Woodside as the third quarterback just to give him an extra paycheck for the rest of the season. They're not going to need Logan Woodside for any reason. I hope not. But, I mean, we haven't even seen Jake Browning in the game, so let's not get ahead of ourselves and be calling up Logan Woodside if we don't have to. Just trying to think of what else did we see in this game that might have been remotely interesting. We also saw Mike Hilton have 3 tackles for loss. Mike Hilton was cutting up in the run game, making stops, making that interception like we talked about. So Mike Hilton had one of the best games of his season, definitely. Akeem Davis-Gaither led the Bengals with 12 tackles, but pretty quiet. Didn't hear his name called too often. Jordan Battle had 10 tackles combined. Jermaine Pratt had 8 tackles, but 1 tackle for loss. Good play by Jermaine Pratt. He went over and basically, flexed on the Titans sideline, said how he's the best in the world. And then right after that, Jermaine Pratt got like 3 missed tackles where guys are just running around Jermaine Pratt, and he's like, he can't even move. Jermaine Pratt is so slow in a lot of these situations. He has no lateral quickness and ability to change direction. Guys are making him look silly out there. If the only thing Jermaine Pratt is able to do is like run straight ahead. Outside of that, it's not looking very good for Jermaine Pratt. We'll have to see if he comes back next year or if they let him go and try to save some money. But I forgot to mention Jamar Chase. He also had 9 receptions for 94 yards. No touchdowns, though. Long of 29. So for Jamar Chase's standards, maybe a little bit quiet, not quite 100 yards receiving, but 9 catches, 94 yards, nothing to scoff at, obviously. And he continues to lead the rest of the NFL in every receiving category. So there's going to be no doubt why Jamar Chase is going to earn every penny of that contract that he deserves. And if he doesn't get a contract in the offseason, don't be surprised if Jamar Chase doesn't show up to training camp and maybe misses a few games on top of that. Because at this point, if they can't get it worked out, it's ridiculous. But there's a little bit of hope in the fact that T. Higgins switched agents, and now Jamar Chase and T. Higgins both have the same agent, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know how that changes up the dynamic, whether, they both want to get the most money, but does that mean that they both want to play for the Bengals? Or I don't know how that's going to work. We'll have to see. Maybe the Bengals are able to work with Jamar Chase's agent somewhat better, but they didn't get anything signed with Jamar Chase in the offseason either. So I don't know what T's strategy here is, because I could understand if Jamar Chase had got a deal done and T. Higgins didn't, then T. Higgins could say, oh, well, obviously I need that agent because they're able to get deals done. But Jamar Chase's agent didn't get anything done either. So I don't know what he's thinking about. But Mike Gesicki had a few nice catches in this game, mostly in the first half. I don't think Mike Gesicki had any catches in the second half, but the Bengals barely had the ball in the second half at all. It was weird how the Bengals defense in the second half kept taking the ball away, but then giving it right back to the Titans. They had a pick 6, so they scored, and then Bengals defense had to go right back on the field. Then Jordan Battle picked up the fumble, then fumbled it through the end zone, gave it back to the Titans again. So the Titans offense was on the field for most of the second half. Overall, Bengals did a pretty good job of keeping the Titans offense in check. Didn't let them throw any deep passes down the field over top of them. They didn't get beat in that regard. So that was good. The one memorable play I forgot to bring up was on Joe Burrow's fumble. It was the Titans' nose tackle, T'Vondre Sweat, number 93, like 6'5", 365-pound guy. He came in and stripped the ball away from Joe Burrow as he was going down, pulled it away from him, and took off running in the opposite direction. And it was questionable whether or not Joe Burrow's elbow was down before the ball got stripped out, but they didn't overturn it, so good play. And so here you got this 365-pound guy with the ball. He's running down the field. It looks ridiculous. And so Bengals offensive lineman Alex Kappa, number 65, he tries to come up and make a tackle on this guy, and he gets completely stiff-armed into the ground, just like a 365-pound guy stiff-arming another 300-plus-pound guy. It looked amazing. And then, so he kept running another like 15 or 20 yards down the field, rumbling over top of, I think Cordell Volson tried to make a tackle, but he couldn't get any piece of him. Went through that arm tackle from Volson. Then all of a sudden, big Amarius Mims, number 71 for the Bengals, comes up from behind, gives him a hard shove from behind that finally puts T'Vondre Sweat down. But not after, how far, I'll have to look at the return on that, but I can't get the box score. But it was something like a 25-yard or so return from T'Vondre Sweat. So they were saying maybe he had a little bit of running back in his, like back in the day when he was a little kid, because it looked like he was pretty natural running with the ball and putting stiff arms on people. So it was like a Derrick Henry stiff arm, except on a 300-pound guy. So it was amazing play for the Titans. And that at that moment, the Titans were leading in the game. So the Titans were ahead and stiff arming guys. And it was just like, what is going on in this game? So many back and forth plays. Bengals getting defensive scores. Geno Stone and Jordan Battle making plays. Just unbelievable. So as bad as the game was, it was also entertaining, and that's all we can really hope for. So hopefully the next game against the Browns is going to be similar. I mean, they're playing Jameis Winston, so he's much like Will Levis. He's prone to turning the ball over, but also throwing for a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. So if nothing else, this game should be pretty interesting. And one last, thing to mention before I get out of here, the Trey Hendrickson, the other big player for the Bengals defense, he was able to get in there on that strip sack on Will Levis. For some reason, Titans decided to not block Trey Hendrickson on a play, and he just went right in and hit the quarterback and caused the fumble. So that was an interesting strategy by the Tennessee Titans, the old don't block him play. Sometimes you see that in the NFL, but he had a sack, and Trey Hendrickson, then right after that, or it was on one of the turnovers where, it was on the Cam Taylor-Britt interception, I think it was, where for some reason Trey Hendrickson got a late push on Will Levis, and then he was getting into it. He got a 15-yard unnecessary roughness penalty on Trey Hendrickson. And Zach Taylor was out there again trying to talk to Trey Hendrickson and getting in his face. But he's always laughing everything off. He's always got this he's never getting in a player's face and yelling at them and telling them, hey, don't do that. It's always just kind of laughing it off oh, hey, Trey, good play, nice 15-yard penalty, buddy, but don't do that. So I don't know how seriously players actually take Zach Taylor. And I know I say this all the time, but there was the first touchdown in this game from the Bengals came on a play where it was basically just a scramble drill, backyard football. Joe Burrow's running around for literally 9.2 seconds. They showed on the Fox broadcast from the time Joe Burrow caught the pass, he scrambled around, avoided rushers, stepped up, stepped to the side, ran around, threw it back across his body. 9.2 seconds. They said it was the longest time to throw in his entire NFL career. Well, guess what? That's not the play that Zach Taylor called. He didn't say, okay, now here's the plan. We're going to have Joe Burrow stand there and run around for about 9 seconds and then throw it to you after everybody runs around in circles in the back of the end zone. There's no way that's the play that they called. You can coach them on how to be more effective in that type of a situation and what to do and how to get open when you're in that type of a scramble drill. Yeah, but that can't be the plan. That was never the plan. That's just Joe Burrow and his receivers improvising on the fly, making something happen outside of the boundaries of the play. So there's no credit that goes to Zach Taylor and the offensive staff for that particular design or play call. Like I'm saying, the play initially, whatever Zach Taylor called, wasn't effective. It actually didn't work. So maybe, it would have been better or easier if they would have just called a play that worked and didn't make it so difficult. Doesn't have to require Joe Burrow scrambling around for 10 seconds and throwing miraculous passes every time to guys who are just barely not even open. It should be easier if they had a good coach. So I think there's nothing really special or unique about Zach Taylor. And we'll have to see in the offseason, what does Joe Burrow decide behind the scenes? Because like I said, that blow up on the sidelines, that could be an indication of Zach Taylor's welcome is worn out with Joe Burrow. Maybe Joe Burrow just decides he's had enough of Zach Taylor and he'd like a different offensive philosophy, somebody else calling the plays in his headset, and maybe he doesn't want to hear Zach Taylor's voice anymore. We'll have to see. Fingers crossed. We'll have to see. But in the next episode, we're going to be breaking down this next Browns-Bengals game, and we'll get to see what happens on Hard Knocks. The episode of Hard Knocks is coming out tonight, so that'll be something to keep our eye on. They're going to have a breakdown. I bet they don't cover that Joe Burrow, Zach Taylor blow up on the sidelines. I would imagine that the Bengals would want to erase that, scrub that from the records as much as possible. So we're going to see everything else interesting besides that, I'm sure, in this game. So that'll be something to talk about and discuss. Not only that, but the preview in the next episode. So thank you so much for listening. If you've listened all the way, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, 5-star rating, all that kind of business, so that more people can learn about this show. But until next episode, I'm going to leave you with a hoo day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.